Hello, welcome to This Week in Politics. Well, this week should go down in history to be known as Sex Week. It's been amazing. It seems like when those women came forward about Judge Roy Moore down in Alabama, that was just like the opening floodgate. And we're going to talk about some of the questions it raised, who all is involved, what all is involved, how we got here. But there's a lot of questions. I think it's a deeper issue. Is it, for a lot of these, you have to ask yourself, is it really sexual misconduct or is it power plays? Let me read some of the names that have been involved. Matt Lauer, Al Franken, Roy Moore, David Letterman, that's an old one, Garrison Keillor, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Clinton, Charlie Rose, Bill O'Reilly, Louis C.K., Representative Conyers, Bill Cosby, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ted Kennedy, JFK, Kevin Spacey, and I'm sure there's many more. Now here's the bad news. The bad news is just because these people, now some of them have been convicted, but for the most part, just because they've been accused does not mean they've been convicted. And as much as I would like to have it be that way, it is not. I would imagine most of these are probably accurate. But I know for a fact that some of them are not accurate. The ones we know that are accurate: David Letterman, Bill Cosby, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Louis C.K., Kevin Spacey, JFK, Ted Kennedy, Al Franken, Matt Lauer, Harvey Weinstein. Out of that list, those are the ones that we know for sure because they've either been convicted or have admitted to it. But was it really actions or was it accusations? Now, there's a big difference between actions and accusations. An accusation could be true or it could be false. But unfortunately, with this kind of accusation, the outcome between an action and an accusation is usually the same. It's one of those things where the guy is considered guilty until he proves himself innocent. And that's wrong. And you can see that in the proof. In the private sector, as an example, the most recent one was Matt Lauer. Somebody came up and said something on Sunday, and he was fired on Monday. No investigation, no innocent until proven guilty. Some lady said something to the higher ups on Sunday, and their number one personality on TV gets fired on Monday. Now, as much as Matt Lauer is a left-wing politician, and I don't agree with him on anything, I think he was treated poorly. Now, he did come out, and this is very interesting, and I noticed Al Franken did the same thing. He did not come out and say, "I'm sorry for my actions." What they both said was, "I'm sorry if what I did offended these people." There's a difference. He's not apologizing for his actions. He's apologizing that they got offended. In a roundabout way, making it their fault, not his. I've never seen a Republican do that. I don't know why people do that. If you're going to apologize, apologize, and if you're not, why play games with the words? That never has made sense to me. But people do that in real life too, and I've been a victim of that. Now, out of the people that I mentioned, there was something that occurred to me. Everyone that came forward was a female. Now, in this day of open sexuality and I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay kind of atmosphere with sex, why hasn't any men come forward? And I don't know the answer to that. I know it's not shame, but I don't know the answer. Because you would think out of all those people, one of them prefers boys. I know for a fact that we had one here in Illinois. I tried forever to remember his name and I couldn't. But he was the ex-Speaker of the House. He retired. He got caught trying to embezzle money or somehow getting the money to pay off some guy that threatened to go public for a homosexual relationship that he had. He was convicted, but I think he was convicted for the money thing, and I don't even think he got any jail time. I don't remember. I just couldn't remember the guy's name. Hasker, Dennis Hasker. That was his name. He's from here in Illinois. But he's the only one that I know of, and he tried really hard to keep it secret. I don't think it was because it was men. I think it was because it was sex. But I thought that was interesting. Why only women are complaining? Now, another bad part to this is this. We are giving too much power to the accusers and not enough power to the accused. That is not true in a murder case. That is not true in any other case, with the exception of the IRS. The IRS, you are guilty and you have to prove your innocence. That's true. But with that one exception, there is no other case where the accuser has more control, more power than the person being accused. I did a series of programs on preachers and rated them so that you could go there and find out if this preacher was teaching the Word of God or not, and all about them, biographies kind of. And one of them I did was Billy Graham. And I learned a lot from Billy Graham, and I do not mean about the Word of God. I mean, well, I did, but what I took away from him a lot was how to run a ministry. And one of the things that he lives by is he is never alone with a female. He either has somebody else with him, he leaves the door open. When he goes traveling on the road, he has bodyguards go into the hotel room before he gets in there and looks all over. And they asked him why, and he said, well, for all I know, there's a girl and a naked girl hiding in a closet. I go in, get undressed, get ready for bed. She jumps out, sits on my bed, and the guy comes out of the closet, takes a picture, and that's plastered all over the newspapers that my ministry is done. Teddy Kennedy could have used that advice. But I think the accusers have too much power. Now, for you millennials and younger, I want to go over a couple of these cases that you might not be aware of. When JFK was president, it was a well-known fact that he had women coming in and out of the White House. There's tunnels underneath there, and he would sneak them in through there. And the Secret Service knew it, the press corps knew it, everybody knew it, but everybody kept their mouth shut. And why? Because he was a liberal Democrat. In their mind, he was liberal. And by today's comparison, he was a conservative and probably a Republican. But that was the case with Ted Kennedy. With JFK. Now, also in the 60s, his brother, Ted Kennedy, was out drinking one night, as only Ted Kennedy could do. He was taking a female home, Ted was driving. He flipped the car or ran the car off of a bridge in Chappaquiddick, and the car flipped upside down. He got out of the car, went back to his house, waited for hours, then called the cops with his attorney, and the girl was dead in the car. He didn't bother to help the girl. He didn't run and call an ambulance. He didn't do anything. He went home and sobered up, and then called the cops and said it was an accident. And you know what? He never paid. There was no trial. There was no censoring. There was no kicking out of the and he was in Congress or the Senate for the rest of his life. He paid no consequences. Why? Because he was a liberal Democrat. And when you are a liberal Democrat, you get a pass. You get a pass from the press. They do not hold your feet to the fire. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the ex-governor and also the actor, had an affair with his housekeeper. She got pregnant. He had a child with her. Paid no consequences. He was still governor of California. And when he got out of there, he went back to making movies. No consequences. Why? Because he was labeled a Republican, but he was a liberal Democrat. And his wife's name was, are you ready for this? Kennedy. He married into the Kennedy family. So of course the press isn't going to go after him. He's part of royalty. Now compare that with the Judge Roy Moore case in Alabama. No proof, no admission, 40-year-old accusations, and out of all of the accusations, only one of them would have been illegal, and that one's been torn to shreds. And yet, he has been tried and convicted and prosecuted in the press. Why? Because he's a Republican. You see what I mean? Too much power given to the accusers and not enough given to the people that are being accused. Now, I'll tell you one name that's not on here that should be. And again, for you millennials that don't know this, this is a well-known secret. Hillary Clinton is a homosexual and has been a homosexual for many, many years. Everybody in Washington knows it. All the press corps knows it. It's an open secret. And yet, nobody's written about it. Nobody's said anything. I know for a fact that one of her pages was fired because she would not give in to Hillary Clinton. She's a liberal Democrat. Now, Al Franken. Not only was he accused by multiple women, there are photographs, and he admitted it, and he's still in Congress. He's still a senator with no repercussions. He said he's going to cooperate with an ethics committee. Let me tell you about ethics committees, okay? If you're a Democrat and there's an ethics committee, this thing will drag on for years and years and years. And when it's all said and done, it's going to be swept under the rug and nothing's going to happen. All he has to do, because he's a Democrat, is to write out the story. Is it right? No. But that's the difference. Now, I sat and I thought about this, and I thought about all of these cases, and I thought about what are the possible societal outcomes of this week in sex? Well, I got to be honest with you. If I'm hiring people, I'm not hiring any females. I don't need that headache. I don't even need the potential for a headache. I'll just hire all men. Yeah, there'll be some homosexuals that get hired probably in the scheme of things, but that'll be a rarity. It appears now that if I hire a female, chances are 50-50 we're going to have a problem. Or hire all women, get rid of all the men. Now, you'll have some homosexual things, of course, but that'll be the rarity. Another possible outcome could be accusations becomes the new evidence. And it appears that in the private sector, this has already happened. It appears that all you have to do is to accuse someone and they're fired. And I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but this happened to me years ago. I was married at the time. I was in banking and I was a supervisor. And the boss told me to take one of the tellers downstairs, and we were to work on some kind of a project. I don't remember what it was. And it was the basement of a 2-story bank. And so we're down there sitting at a table just doing the project. I mean, absolutely nothing going on. And out of nowhere, she busts into tears. And I said, "What's the matter with you?" And she gets up and runs upstairs. So I go upstairs and I go back doing my job. And at the end of the day, the boss comes and says, "Brian, come in here." And he said, what did you say or do to her today? I said, "I don't know. We were just down there doing our project and she burst into tears." And he said, "Well, she said that you hurt her feelings by saying," and I don't remember what I supposedly said. And I said, "Well, that never happened." And he said, "Well, unfortunately, I don't have a choice here. You're fired." I lost my job. My plan was to have a career in banking, and I just got fired for nothing. Now that I'm older and I look back on that, this girl was climbing. She was trying to get my job, and I don't know if she ever got it or not. I don't care. But wow. So, I mean, it happened to me, and it happens every day. All the girl has to do is open her mouth. And for those of you that are married, you will know that, or have girlfriends and boyfriends, if you are a female, all you have to do is cry rape or cry assault, and the guy goes to jail. They don't even ask questions. They just handcuff you, and out the jail you go, whether it's true or not. Because from the police standpoint, better you should spend some time in jail away from there than they leave and you really do beat her up. So throughout society, men, when it comes to women accusing men lose all the time, almost every time. So what are the possible outcomes? Well, this is the outcome right here. Careers are ruined. Careers are lost. Elections are lost. Lives are lost. Look at the Ted Kennedy case. And all because of women accusing men. True or not, the truth becomes secondary in this. Now, am I advocating women not talking? Absolutely not. Here's what I am advocating. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that when we talk about conclusions. Oh, well, let's go ahead and talk about it. I think that in order to minimize this, here's what I think. For every, let's take Roy Moore as an example, Judge Roy Moore. Let's take him as an example. Now, there have been 5 or 6 women who came forward and accused him of something 40 years ago, okay? I think, first off, it should not affect the election. Let's win the election, and then let's have the police look into this. And no matter which way they find, somebody's going to jail. If he did any of those things, he needs to go to jail. But if those women accused him and he didn't do it, they need to get the same jail sentence that they were pushing for Judge Roy Moore to get. That'll end all this. It's just like If a woman accuses a man of rape and they can prove that he did not do it and she's just crying rape, she needs to get the exact same sentence he would have got if he was convicted. If he would have gotten 25 years in jail, then she needs to get 25 years in jail. That'll end all that false rape crud. And it will end all of these careers being lost. That's how I think you fix this. What is the possible societal outcome to this? If this is the new normal, I have 2 daughters. What would, if, and the one is relatively young. What is this teaching her? It's teaching her that men are evil. Are all men evil? No. Do all women accuse falsely? No. But there are monsters out there that are men. And there are monsters out there that are women. But when they all hit at once like this, it's leaving the taste in the mouth, true or not, that men are evil. And that plays right into what the Democrats have been trying to do. They've been trying to, and I'm going to use a proper term, I'm not going to say what I normally say. The left has been trying to feminize American men for the last 3 decades. So this would fit right into what they've been pushing. Now, it also came to light this week that there is a shush fund for Congress and its employees that pay off these people who have been sexually have charged Congress or their employees with sexual abuse of some sort or another. It is accountable to nobody. It's a set aside pile of money that they pay these people out of, and it's kept private. They all sign non-disclosure agreements, and most of the congressmen don't know about it. The ones that know about it are probably the ones that have used it. We know that since it was set up, and I don't know when it was set up exactly, but we know that $17 million has been spent on settlements. Now, the people that are running it say, well, it includes many other kinds of settlements in addition to those, to which I say, okay, I don't want you deciding what I get to see or don't. I want to see it all, and you let me decide which one is sexual and which one is for Katrina and which one is for ethics violations and whatever. But give me all the information. As I understand it, there's been about 200 payments made out of this account. I want to see 200 names, the amount for each one, who it was paid out to, and on whose behalf it was paid. Give me that information and let me decide. Now you say, well, they signed non-disclosure agreements and everybody's happy. Why? Well, because it's my tax dollars. You're using my money to pay for that. You have no problem at all giving me a copy of the budget. You know, how much we spend on an airplane and how much we spend on a hammer and a toilet seat. Because it's our tax dollars. We have a right to know. Just like this money is our tax dollars, we have a right to know. Now, if Senator Joe Blow is going to pay it out of his own pocket, I can't really make him do that. I can legally try to go get it by building a case, but you're using my money. I have every right to know what you're spending my money on. So I think that needs to be made public. Let's talk about what are some of the causes for the atmosphere in our society that makes it okay, A, for these men that have done these things to think that's okay, and number 2, for these women to come forward even if there was nothing done. What in our society has caused that? Now, if you look back in our history, in the 50s and 60s, this was a problem, I'm sure. But you know what? It didn't dominate the headlines. It wasn't done by all of these people all of this time. Something has drastically changed in our society. Back then, it was the exception. Today, it's the rule. And I think there are several things that have happened to cause this breakdown in our society. And one of them is the liberal agenda. And we don't have to look very farther than Hollywood. Hollywood, since the 60s and the sexual revolution, has turned out movie after movie after TV show after TV special after video after video after movie about no boundaries. When it comes to sex, we have no boundaries in Hollywood. You know, it's okay to sleep with whoever you want to, whenever you want to, however you want to. It's okay to go take what you want. You know, there became a new saying in the 90s and 2000s that it's easier to ask for an apology than ask for permission. And that seemed to be how society has been operating. Look in Washington. Under the Obama administration, and I've been alive for a lot of years, okay? I have never, ever seen anything remotely as corrupt as the Obama and Clinton administrations. Oh my gosh. This is not normal American politics. This is banana republic, third world politics. Everybody's on the take, everybody's bribing, everybody's lying and cheating and conniving, and everybody. If it all comes out, and you know, just the Clintons, I could probably write a 3-volume book on all of the illegal, corrupt things that family has done in the last 30 years. Why are they getting a free ride, and why are they not in jail? Because they're liberal Democrats and they're getting a free ride. The people that are supposed to be in positions of authority to judge them are liberal Democrats. The press that is supposed to be one of the checks on the system are liberal Democrats. So they've gotten a free ride. But Hollywood is corrupt, Washington is corrupt, and I mentioned this one, the press is corrupt. So everything, starting with my generation, and that would be the 60s and 70s, from that point forward, has been the liberal agenda has been pushed in every segment of our life. Every segment. Hollywood, the press, the government, the school system, anything that touches our lives has been liberalized. You know, just as an example, liberals in our public education want to dumb down our kids. In my day, it was said that kids reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, guess what? The liberals have gotten rid of the writing. Now, you may or may not know this, but penmanship is not taught in public schools anymore. So out of the 3 basic things that you're supposed to learn in school, they've gotten rid of one of them and are proud of it. Now, they use some silly logic about, you know, we don't write anymore, we text or we use computers. Communication is communication. You need to learn penmanship. But anyway, but that is the left's agenda. It's easier to herd uneducated sheep than it is to herd and manipulate educated human beings. So that's one of the areas. Another one is a lack of accountabilities from Christians. I want to know how come the Christian leaders in this country, and when I say Christian leaders, I don't mean the black Christian leaders, because they are not Christian leaders, none of them. They are all activists with a ulterior agenda, and most of them aren't even Christian. And I don't mean to lump them together. There are white ones that I have the same feelings for, but the black religious leaders in this country are black militant leaders who use religion to further their agenda in general. But I mean the guy that's in your church and my church that's preaching, and the leaders of the Bible study classes. Why are they not standing up and holding these people accountable? Instead of allowing Matt Lauer to get away with a half-assed apology and go retire on $28 million a year, and he'd probably go write a book and then go on a speaking tour. Instead of allowing that to happen, why don't we as Christians band together and make sure that this guy gets prosecuted to the full extent of the law for every female he's violated, instead of letting the press shove this under the rug and move on to the next topic? Our Christian leaders in this country need to step up and speak God's word into these situations. We need to bring morality back to our society instead of free love, free sex, free everything, no boundaries. Let's get rid of that and let's bring God back into the equation. I touched on this earlier. Another cause for the atmosphere of this country is because the liberals have covered for the liberals. You know, and in these cases above, the liberal press has covered, and again, I'm going to go to Matt Lauer. They have covered over for him. They've almost made him like a god, you know, showering praise on him. And he was my mentor, and he was so nice. And this is absolutely shocking, which when you delve into it just a little bit, you will realize that everybody at the station knew that he was a horn dog. Everybody near there knew that he was a sleazy guy. But the press is going to cover for him to cover up their agenda. And the press has been doing this, like I said, since the 60s. They covered up for JFK. They covered up for Ted Kennedy. They covered up for Bill Cosby. They covered up for Al Franken. They covered up for Harvey Weinstein for years. And everybody in Hollywood knew that guy was a rapist. They covered up for Bill Clinton. But just let a couple of 40-year-old accusations be made against a Christian right-winger named Roy Moore, and the press goes nuts, like hell just froze over. The liberals have covered for the liberals. And we as conservatives, and I mean conservative press outlets, not just shows like this, but I mean Breitbart, they need to go on a crusade here. And they need to take each one of these at a time. Matt Lauer, put every resource you've got to holding this guy's feet to the fire. Now, if it turns out that he didn't do it, then we should go after the women that accused him and put them in jail. But this needs to be done. There needs to be consequences for these actions. That's one of the things that liberals are so good at, and we as conservatives are not standing up. They do not want consequences to actions. Look at that Mexican guy out in San Francisco that killed that white girl. They found him not guilty. He admitted to having the gun. He admitted to shooting the gun. He admitted to killing her, and he got off on arms possession. Are you kidding me? There are no consequences to killing that girl. We need to start holding people accountable for their actions. Liberals and conservatives, all people, young and old, need to be held accountable for their actions without exception. I think another contributing factor is the devaluation of women. And I think Democrats are largely responsible for this. They claim to be the party of women. I mean, Hillary ran her whole campaign on, I am going to be the first elected female because I have a vagina that qualifies me to be president. Okay? How degrading to women. That is just degrading in my opinion. And we could, again, go all the way back to the 60s. And I can remember court cases about pornography going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court holding their nose and saying, we don't like it, we think it's disgusting and degrading, but it's free press. And that's part of free speech, is to be able to allow pornography. So Hugh Hefner got a pass, and the guy from Penthouse, whatever his name is. But anyway, it proliferated. And through that multi-billion-dollar industry, every year, women are degraded in these films over and over and over and over and over and over, to where women's lives begin to mean nothing. I mean, they did a last day interview with Ted Bundy from prison. And Ted Bundy said, I was a normal, well-adjusted child. I had a good upbringing in a Christian house. He said, but I got into pornography. It became an addiction, and I needed more and more and more. He said, until eventually I had to go out and do more and more and more. And his life reflects that perfectly. The night he got killed, he snuck into a dorm room down in California, or down in Florida, and snuck from room to room and killed one or two girls in several bedrooms at a time. He would stand, they would have two beds in a room, and he would sneak into the room, stand between them with a baseball bat, and very quickly hit both of them in the head. Boom, boom, and they'd be dead. Then he'd sneak out, close the door, go to the next one. The only way they caught him is one girl hurting and hid under the bed, and he didn't see her, but she saw him. He needed more and more. So one murder wasn't enough. He needed two. Then two wasn't enough. So then he moves to Florida and kills as many as he can in a dorm. Pornography degrades women, whether it's voluntary or not. So the women are making money at it. You know, it used to be that they would get hooked on drugs, and it was basically an involuntary thing. But today it's a career choice that women make. But these women are not doing women any good at all. They are degrading women. Now this one I lay right at the footstep of the women's movement. Women wanting to be treated like men. That is the dumbest thing. I never understood that. Women had no idea how men were treated. Did you know that before women started this, they lived quite a bit longer than men? But now the life expectancy between men and women is pretty much equal. And it's not because men are living longer, it's because women are dying younger. The women libbers, or as Rush calls them, the feminazis, think that women should be able to go out and do everything that men do, and men should be able to do everything that women do. Well, excuse me, I have no desire at all to be anything like a female. I don't want that, don't need that, don't ever want to even contemplate that. God made me male, and I'm going to be male, for whatever that means, and I don't care what anybody else thinks it means. I don't have to think about it, I just am. Why would a female want to get up every morning and go out and fight the fight when you can stay at home and do a job and be rewarded with it? It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but women bought into it. And now women go right from school to careers and high pressure, and sure, they make money, and good for them, they can stand on their own. But you know what? When that happens, there's a whole dynamic that happens to individuals. Yes, it gives them independence, but it makes them less reliant on their husband. Now you say, well, that's a good thing. Well, sometimes, but a marriage that is, and a relationship that is going to stay together, they need to be mutually respected, but they need to be mutually integrated, mutually needed. The female needs to be needed by the male, and the male needs to be needed by the female. It is not about let's both go have our individual lives, our individual careers. We'll come together for 3 hours a night, get up in the morning and do it again. That's not what a relationship is about. That's not the way God designed man and woman. If I wanted to marry the phrase that I use is, I want a completer, not a competer. If I wanted to marry a part of my competition in the workforce, I'd go marry a guy. I don't need a competitor in my own house. I want to come home and have a person, a woman there that is going to complete me. She's going to build me up so that tomorrow when I go out, I can do it again and do my best for her. But the female movement in the 60s and 70s, thank you, Gloria Steinem, has just about all but eliminated the American family and the American marriage. And I think that has contributed largely to these sexual allegations. If women weren't in the workforce, there'd be very little need for any of this. Okay, so there'd be secretaries. But again, like I said, it was the exception, not the rule. I mean, it's just math. If 10% of the female population is working, then there's only going to be a percentage of that 10% that are involved in any of this. But if 80% of the female population is working, then that percentage is going to be 8 times larger. Now it becomes the rule, not the exception. So women today think that they can have their cake and eat it too. What was that commercial in the 80s? I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan. What they were telling women is, you can have babies, you can have a career, you can have a house, you can have a husband, you can have it all. Really? And so a lot of women bought into that. And guess what happened? Look at what happened in our society. Society is broken down because now it's built on what individuals want and not what God wants. The family was designed to be a certain way. And when you get out of that way, society breaks down. It happens all the way around the world. Look at any country where the family is not the way that it's supposed to be. Their society breaks down. Look at the Middle East. Look all the way around the world. I heard something this week that I just thought was absolutely laughable. And it was said in a context where it was said as just as a fact. It was given as a question to somebody who says, the questioner was asking whoever they were talking to. So with all of these outcomes, do you think the Democrats have lost the moral high ground? I laughed. How can you possibly think that the Democrats have had any type of moral high ground? Let's think about that. Where do morals come from? They come from knowing what's right and wrong. And where does that come from? It comes from God. The Democrats are the party that have worked the hardest to get God out of everything. It's the Democrats that don't want God in schools. It's the Democrats that don't want God in the courthouses. It's the Democrats that don't want God anywhere around. So when they say moral high ground, what they mean is their morals. Have they lost their moral high ground? And the answer to that question is absolutely not, because they have no morals. In Barack Obama's first presidential nomination at the convention, somebody stood up and said, "We have not mentioned God in our paper. Should we insert God?" And he got booed off of the stage by the entire Democratic National Convention. They booed God. I'm not being anti-Democrat here. I'm just telling you the way it is. It was the Warren Court, a Democratic court, that approved abortion. Roe v. That approved abortion. It was a Democrat court under Obama that approved gay marriage. And need I mention, it was a Republican in Alabama on the Supreme Court, Judge Roy Moore, that stood up and said, "You can't do that in my state. I'm not going to allow that." And they kicked him off of the court for that. But good for him. He's the only one out of 50 judges nationwide that told them, no, you can't do that. It's the Democrats who have done all of these things that are against God. It was the Democrats who were pro-slavery. Let me say that again. It was the Democrats who were pro-slavery. It was the Republicans who got rid of slavery under Lincoln. All through history, the Democrats have stood for things that go against God and God's word. So when they say, "Have we lost the moral high ground?" that is just laughable to me. There is no such thing. The Democrats have not had the moral high ground since their inception. So I want us to just think about this week in sexual scandals. This is a very deep topic. This is an opportunity for us as a society to think about how we got here. How did we get to the point where careers are lost in 1 week? Careers are lost in politics and in broadcasting, in the press. And by the way, all of these have been in the press. I mean, either in the government, private business, or the press. And by private business, I mean in Hollywood. All of the places where I mentioned were corrupt, this is where these are happening. It's time for us to start asking some serious questions. How did we get here? How can we fix this? Is it fixable as long as our society stays the same? And if it's not, how can we change our society? Now, I have my opinions, and at some point I may make those more publicly known. But right now, I think the discussion needs to happen. But unfortunately, I can promise you now that the Democrats are not going to have that discussion. The Democratic press is never going to be objective about it. The Democratic politicians will never admit there's a problem. They will say this is an aberration. So having that discussion is like trying to correct the last 50 years. And it appears that nobody in positions of authority, except the Tea Party, none of the establishment, none of the Democrats, none of the mainline Republicans, none of the people in Hollywood, none of the people in the press want to have that discussion or want to change, because they're where they want to be. They are in control, and that's where they like it, no matter what the cost to society or to us as a people. And I think that's sad. I don't think we're done. I think it's going to get a lot worse. How is it going to get worse? I don't know. I don't know. But I know when society starts going down and they take God out of everything, then everything goes down. They took God out of Hollywood, and Hollywood is a sewer. They took God out of politics, and politics has become a sewer. They took God out of the press, and the press has become a sewer. Where else have they taken God out of? I don't know off the top of my head, but wherever they took him out of, it's a sewer, and it's going to bubble to the bubble up, and guess what's going to come to the top? Yeah, that's right. Well, that was the main story I wanted to talk about this week. Now, each week I like to take a look at current events, and in here I mentioned 2 or 3 stories that are going on for a couple of reasons. Number one, in the future, we can look back and say, oh yeah, I remember that, or I forgot about that. Or, so that was the week that happened, the same week this happened. Just to tie them all together that way, um, people who are rewriting history in the future uh, can't just arbitrarily go back and change the timeline to fit their narrative. There will be a digital record of the some of the main events of each week to tie things together. Now, one of the biggest stories this week was the tax cut. Has dominated the news this week, and it appears, uh, as I record this on Sunday, it has not been voted on yet. But here's what's happened. The Senate passed a version, the House passed a version, it went to committee. They've got it just about ready to go. The leaders of both houses have come out and said they have the votes to pass it, even with one person, one of the Republicans, not supporting it. It appears it's going to pass. It's a matter right now that they might be working on one or two things to change it. I expect next week to say that we do have a tax cut bill passed and ready to go to the president's desk. That's huge. This tax cut that's coming will cut the corporate rate from 35 down to 20%, and that's one of the things they're trying to change. Little Marco Rubio wants to raise it to 22 so he can do something for the poor, which sounds altruistic, but in reality, the people he's talking about, he wants to do something with the child care credit. He wants to double that. Well, the people that get the child care credit aren't paying taxes anyway. He wants to double the amount of cash they're getting back for doing nothing. To me, that's a non-starter. That will do nothing. But I think right now it's a power grab to get something so he can go home and say he got something. Who knows? But I suspect that next week we'll have a vote. And because of this, the stock market topped 24,000 this week for the first time and continues to go up, all in expectations of getting this thing passed this year. Also, another current event this week was that illegal Mexican out in San Francisco who was tried for the Kate Staley murder. And I talked about it earlier, but a gun was stolen out of a federal employee's car, and that gun this Mexican used to shoot Kate Stanley. He admitted he had the gun, he admitted he fired it, he admitted he killed her, and they found him not guilty of murder 1, murder 2, or involuntary manslaughter. At the very least, they should have found involuntary manslaughter. He was found totally innocent. The only thing he was found guilty of was a felon, which, by the way, he was a 7-time felon in possession of a firearm. Mandatory sentence is 3 years, maximum sentence 3 years. With time he's already served in jail for this, he's going to get basically no jail time. So he admits to killing her, and he admitted on tape, on video, that the reason he kept coming, but he got deported 5 different times, he kept coming back, and every time he went to San Francisco, and they asked him why, and he said, because it's a sanctuary city, they're not going to turn me over to the feds no matter how many times they catch me. So they're already using San Francisco as a sanctuary city. And because of that policy, he was caught 5 different times on 7 different felonies and released back into the streets, and he eventually killed an American female. Now, this story is deeper than just about her. Sanctuary cities basically is saying this: the life of illegal immigrants is more important to us than the life of American citizens. Isn't that what that just said? Kate Stanley's life meant less to these people in San Francisco than this illegal Mexican. He's free. I mean, okay, so let's say he serves another year. He'll be free. He can go back to killing on the streets, making drugs, selling drugs, thugging people. But Kate Stanley's dead. Kate Stanley's family will always be in mourning because of what he did, and he's free. And San Francisco endorses that. They encourage that. In fact, they let this happen. And we're called on it, and they absolutely stand behind it. These Democrats that claim to be pro-women are anti-women. These Democrats that claim to be pro-American, they're anti-American. Stop listening to the verbiage that these liberals are giving you and start looking at their actions. They say they are pro-woman, right? But yet, Hillary destroyed every female that Bill Clinton slept with. They're not a party of women. That list of people I gave you at the beginning, 90% of them were Democrats. They claim to be the party of women, and yet look at how much they abuse women. Liberals who control California and San Francisco specifically claim to be the party of women, and yet an American female gets killed, and the illegal Mexican immigrant that kills her gets off scot-free. How is that the party of women? I don't know. That doesn't make the least bit of sense to me. And the last one I wanted to talk about was, and I mentioned this earlier, the Dow sets a record of 24,000. Now, I think that's awesome. And when Trump took office 10 months ago, it had not been above 20,000. It had been in the 19,000 range for a while. And as soon as he took office, all the Democrats were saying that if he's elected, the stock market's going to crash. No, it didn't. It went up, and I knew it was going to go up, in spite of what the press says. And it has continued to go up. It has set record after record after record. And now it sets another record on the week that they're looking at voting on tax relief plan. Now, our gross national product growth has been 3% every quarter he's been in office. It was 3% upgraded to 3.1. The next quarter was 3.1. The one that just came out, I believe, was 3.2. And all of this growth has happened without a tax cut. But the reason it's happened is because Trump has been doing all of the right things. He's cut regulation on businesses. He single-handedly brought the coal industry back into being. He brought a couple of major companies committing billions and billions of dollars into our economy to happen very quickly. He just got back from Asia and brought back $250 billion in new contract deals for Americans. Trump is out doing all of these things, and he hasn't even got the tax cut yet. When that tax cut, if it goes through as planned, that 3% will turn into 5% pretty quickly. Pretty quickly. And especially if they have a clause on there for the repatriation of cash that is held overseas. Apple alone probably has $500 billion overseas. If they brought just a percentage of that back to this country and invested it in this country, that would be huge. And that's just Apple. The economy is doing great. It's done better under 10 months of Trump than it did under 8 years of Obama. The Dow sets a record of 24,000. And I think by the end of the week, it was 24,300 and something. In 1 week, it climbed 300 points. It's unbelievable. But what that's telling us is business is hungry. Business is waiting to bust loose. They just need the guarantee of the tax cut. When they get the tax cut, they've already made investments. they're already hiring. They're getting everything ready. That's why we're at 3%. As soon as they pull the trigger on major investments, that's going to go to 5% quickly. They're waiting for the tax cut and for the repatriation of the funds from overseas. And as soon as those things happen, the economy is going to go nuts. Well, that's all the current events I wanted to talk about. That was the main story I wanted to talk about. Now, one last thing. This program and all the programs we do are done and produced by the Prayer Box Ministry. You can find us online at www.prayerboxministry.org. That's org.org. That website was designed to be an interactive website. Go over there and check us out. You can listen to these programs, or the Right Wing Reverend, or you can have somebody read the Bible to you. You can join a prayer group. There's lots to do over there. Go over and take a look. It's prayerboxministry.org. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about. We'll talk to you next week when we sit down and talk about this week in politics.